Hi, this is Nick and Chris here at SaratogaWine.com with a great feature today from Burgundy.
Yep.
The full lineup from the Domaine Michel Sarrazin wines. And we're actually being joined by a very special guest. We have the senior French portfolio manager today from one of our distributors. This is Ilya Smolenskiy. Welcome.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. Really excited to talk about the Sarrazin family, the wines of the Côte Chalonnaise and the village of Givry. Really exciting lineup here.
Excellent. All right, so let's dive into the wines. We'll start out with our first white. So this is the Côte de Roche, correct?
Correct. Yeah. This is a really fun one because, a lot of people do a double take when they see the name of this wine. Côte de Roche shares a name with a very, very famous Grand Cru in the village of Marais-Saint-Denis. This is a different Côte de Roche, but a vineyard that is particularly special in its exposition and where it's located on the slope of Givry. And I'll just show very quickly here. Right at the top in the village of Dracy-le-Fort, you have the Côte de Roche up here. You can see it's pretty high up. You're looking at about 350 meters altitude, really high in the grand scheme of things for Burgundy, and that east exposition. So combining those two things, you get a really mineral, lovely salty purity to that Chardonnay. When we talk about vineyards with La Roche, it's always a good thing. And so this is a really lovely lineup, or a really lovely wine, a rare wine, Chardonnay from the Sarrazin brothers.
Super expressive. I get this like grilled pineapple thing going on, but very bright and fresh as well. I can tell there's definitely some oak on there, but it just seems to be a light touch of oak. Like, it's more like it should be, more of an accent, not overpowering the fruit at all. Lots of bright acidity. I preach balance all the time. So it's got the fruit, it's got the acidic balance, it's got a touch of oak. It's a complete wine to me.
Yeah, I mean the oak that it has is incredibly well integrated. I think what speaks most to me is the freshness of this wine.
Sure.
Really, it's quintessential Chardonnay. You know that right off the bat, but going through the tasting notes and nosing it, it's a fascinating wine. You get kind of minerality and citrus, and like you said, I definitely get that pineapple note as well. But amazing complexity in this wine.
Yeah, hyper complex.
When you consider, the barrel regime that we talked about, it's super well integrated. The oak isn't too overwhelming, but it definitely does. For lack of a better term, I think it tastes more expensive than it is.
No doubt.
For sure.
Yeah.
But don't tell anyone else that.
So all the whites and all the reds, they see full oak treatment, which, and actually this is a great kind of, and I think really one of the unique aspects of Sarrazin compared to the rest of the appellation. So I'm going to show you a picture of their cellar. I'm going to give you a sense. This is the Sarrazin cellar here, and is a room full of barrels. But they have over 50-year relationship with one particular cooper, and that's Francois Frères. And again, and anyone who's nerdy about Burgundy has heard of the name Francois Frères before. One of the most famous barrel makers in Burgundy. He supplies barrels to many of the great estates in Burgundy. Most famously, DRC uses Francois Frères, and so that has given him a lot of notoriety. But it is very rare to see a cellar full of one cooper, let alone Francois Frères. And I bring that up because a barrel is a very important part of the process when you're making wine, and quality of barrel is very important. Going and visiting Burgundy and tasting barrels, you really sometimes you say, oh, this barrel is just a little bit off. This barrel is slightly too toasty. So if you have a trusted relationship with a cooper that is of quality, it is a really great advantage. When I was here for the first time, it really kind of took me aback because Francois Frères barrels are really expensive. To get good oak in your wine, and when I say good oak, I don't mean just a lot of oak, but just good quality that it gives good texture to the wines without overpowering the wines. It's very expensive to get good oak like this, and knowing what they charge for the wines, it didn't really make sense financially. I've only seen really high-end domains that have quality oak like this. And when I asked them about it, they said they have a really long-standing relationship. We're one of their best customers, and they get a nice deal with Francois Frères. And so, barrels in general is something we don't talk a lot about in the wine world. I think there's maybe like some stigma because people then expect the wines to be super oaky or something. But there's no question the greatest wines in the world are aged in oak. And so when you have good quality oak, it makes the wines better. And the fact that this humble little domain that sells their wines for the prices that we're looking at, it's pretty amazing that they use these barrels. So the wine is 100% barrel fermented. They don't do anything out of the ordinary when it comes to winemaking. About 50% are new, which is again, it is relatively high. Especially for wines from the Côte Chalonnaise. But again, you don't really feel them particularly oaky. It is just really a beautiful expression of Givry Chardonnay. In French wine, or at least in Burgundy, if the vineyard name has the word rock somewhere in it, it's usually a pretty good vineyard. And Roche means rock, and that means there's a lot of rocks in the vineyards. That's why it was called that. And when there's a lot of rocks in the vineyards, that means there's a lot of limestone. And when there's a lot of limestone, you generally just get a more lifted, mineral, saltier expression of be it Chardonnay or Pinot Noir.
All right, Ilya, moving on to the next white. This is the Rouy.
So yeah, while the domain is primarily based in Givry, and that's where most of their vineyards are, they do have some vineyards in the other villages of the Côte Chalonnaise. One of those is Rouy. So here's the map of Rouy, and like the Côte d'Or in the north, we have a very similar exposition as I mentioned before, running north-south, and then you have these yellow vineyards that are Premier Crus that run right along the mid-slope. And usually on the mid-slope is where the best vineyards are, because you have this kind of perfect mix between the limestone and clay. Further up the slope, you have very little clay, and sometimes the vines can really struggle when there's not a lot of soil material, and clay in this case. And then the bottom of the slope has a lot of clay, and sometimes you don't want that either because if it rains, it sops up a lot of water, and then there's water damage. And this is a fantastic vineyard right in the heart of the mid slope. You're facing pretty much exactly southeast, so not fully south, so it's not too hot. You get about 250 to 300 meters altitude. A really fantastic site. There are some other famous Vauveries from other producers, so it's kind of a more well-known Premier Cru in Rouy. They don't do anything fancy with their higher end wines. It's the same oak regiment, the same amount of time of barrel aging, but so you really get to see the differences in the vineyards and the terroir expression. Because that really is the only difference. Because winemaking is exactly the same.
Agreed.
And I get more of kind of a mineral component on this one.
Very, as a matter of fact, I was thinking almost Chablis-like to me when I first smelled it. Yeah, a little bit brighter acidity, still tons of fruit.
Yeah.
Rouy is one of the appellations that is more famous for their whites than reds. There are red Rouy produced, but definitely a village that is very renowned for their white wines.
And now let's jump to the red. So we'll start with our first one, the Bourgogne.
Yeah, this is a big wine for the domain in terms of reaching a wide audience. A lot of times producers, they make sure their Bourgogne level wines are really good because that is many times the wine most people are drinking. And I think this is a great example of a producer who really takes their Bourgogne very, very seriously. This is a wine that is 100% from the village of Givry. And that's important because, Bourgogne as an appellation means it can come from anywhere in Burgundy. It means, and that includes Beaujolais, it includes the Mâconnais, regions that are further south. But this is a Bourgogne where they keep it in their home turf. It's all from vineyards that are designated as Bourgogne in the village of Givry. And so you have here, everything that goes into the other wines, old vines, great barrels, everything else is the same. It just comes from vineyards that are classified just on a lower level than the rest of the lineup. All the fruit that goes into the wines are from vineyards that they own and they farm themselves. It is just an added level of control. It's their vision, their everything, their teams, and it creates a kind of a consistent level of quality that is sometimes harder to achieve when you're not working with your own fruit.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Definitely.
And I mean, great kind of jumping off point here. You get that bright cherry, little dusty cherry.
Yep. Again, the good acidic balance.
They use a little bit of less new oak. This one is about 25%. And then once you get to the village level wines, it goes back to 50. We just were visiting Burgundy and we were talking to all of our producers about the 24s because they're going to be bottled pretty soon for many of the domains. And it's a vintage that was very extreme in terms of weather, but kind of an anomalous extreme. It was cold, it was rainy, one of the rainiest growing seasons in the history of Burgundy. A very, very difficult season for the farmers because when it rains a lot, that means you have a lot of mildew, and mildew is no good for the grapes. So it was a real battle with the elements to try to keep the mildew at bay, because once a mildew hits the vine, it kills the grape clusters. And so quantities were really diminished in 24. But at the end of the day, the fruit that ended up in the wineries, mostly harvested in the middle of September, was really high quality. There was less of the grapes, but the grapes that were there were amazing. 24 was kind of a magical vintage in that the fruit just got enough ripeness, but really retained the beautiful acid. And so a really wonderful vintage for people who like that kind of brighter, juicier styles of both Pinot and Chardonnay. It is an amazing vintage for the quality of the wines. Just, when talking to the growers, they're almost like traumatized. They don't want to talk about it. They don't like want to relive the difficult, doing like organic sprays in the pouring rain, mud on your boots. You can't get tractors into the vineyards because it's too muddy. So everything has to be done by hand. Your team is tired. It's just a brutal growing season. But at the end of the day, sometimes those really hard vintages come out with some of the great wines of the decades.
Years ago, I was fortunate to have dinner with a winemaker, and he said it's like the harvest time's the World Series. You can have a terrible year, but if you still make the playoffs and then you can win the World Series, he's like, if we can get to the end of the season and it dries out during harvest, we're fine. It can make beautiful wine. Was it better during harvest? It must have been, right?
That's exactly what happened. It rained, June, July, August. I think producer was telling us like it rained every other day for like 4 months straight. But once September hit and we're getting close to harvest, and it's in modern times, most of the time you're harvesting in August these days, because it's generally warmer. But because it was cooler, they extended to September, and those 2 weeks before harvest were beautiful sunshine. So once it came down to harvest time, no issues, no rot. Whenever it rains during harvest, that's when it gets kind of iffy. But absolutely perfectly healthy grapes, and it's a great analogy to the World Series. Perfect analogy.
That's great. I love that. So not a lot of it, but what's there is great.
It is awesome.
There you go.
Right?
All right. That's all we need to know.
Yeah, this is fantastic. Like I said, a complete wine.
It's awesome.
Lots of fruit, lots of acidity. Definitely just a hint of oak.
Yeah, I expect it to go pretty fast, to be honest. This is a vintage just too good, too easy drinking, too tasty. The price is too good. So yeah, this is going to be I think a quick one for us in the release cycle.
And moving on to the next red, we have the Givry sous la Roche.
This is another one of the kind of the signature wines of the estate. And going back to this idea, if there's a rock in the name, it's usually pretty good. This definitely extends to this wine. 2023 is a great vintage, and a great vintage particularly for red wine. It was a very hot vintage, but a lot of growers, they just know what to do now. The hot seasons of the past where they really struggled is kind of doesn't really happen anymore. I also want to point out one thing about the reds as we go forward. All the wines are unfined, unfiltered across the domain, which I think is always as a positive, not taking potentially anything away from how good the wine was when it was in barrel. And you can see that there's nothing floating in there. It's still a very clean wine. They let it settle and make sure that what they bottle is clean. But just a nice little tidbit about this domain.
I think there's such a floral note in this wine that really kind of gives it such a pretty balanced, balancing out that red fruit,
Right.
like you said. Definitely lots of red licorice, cherry.
Yeah. I get a nice herbal component too,
Yeah.
though. That really kind of adds another element altogether.
Let's dive into the Clos de la Roche now.
Great. Yeah, I always love tasting wines from the same vineyard, but two different expressions. In this case, Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. I think another example of when Pinot Noir at these upper altitudes really just gains this beautiful finesse. Pinot Noir as a grape is always so terroir transparent. You really feel where the vineyard lies when you're drinking the wines. It's really hard to hide. And so this upper part of Clos de la Roche, where this Pinot comes from, I think really just gives this wine an amazing lacy quality that I find pretty irresistible.
You can smell the heat of the vintage, but then when I drank it, again, perfect balance, perfect acidic lift, nice freshness. So,
and I think a bit more complex too, right? Like we're kind of ratcheting up the complexity as we go along here, and I mean, this is for that price. This is unbelievable.
Delicious. Yeah.
I mean, just look at what Clos de la Roche goes for on the market. It's so just someone's gonna Google Clos de la Roche after this video and see that like, wow, how is this possible? This is a great value.
In a way.
Well, they should call this a baby Clos de la Roche.
That's right.
I mean, yeah, this is an awesome wine. It really is. And now moving to the next wine. This is the Givry Premier Cru. So a listed Premier Cru here. Tell us about this one.
This is a wine that I always tend to get in the cellar because this is a really magical vineyard and one of the great Premier Crus of Givry. And great opportunity to pop up with the map again. And here we have right kind of in the heart of the Givry village, really close to the forest line. You can see it's really surrounded by forest. You're at about 300 meters altitude. Really sweet spot again, right in the heart of the mid slope. This is where it is right here. You're facing southeast, but a little bit closer to south. If between the two. But yeah, this is a really complete wine. I think people who want to experience what some great Burgundy can give and why people are so obsessed with the region, but don't necessarily want to spend the Givry or Chambol money. I think this is a really great bottle.
Yeah, it's definitely got tons of complexity. You know, when you think you got it pinned down, I'm like, okay. But my first step, I was like, wow, this is bigger and richer. Then I was like, well, it's a little more elegant. It's got like a hint of blue fruit to it as well.
Totally.
And so just when you think you got it nailed, it just kind of moves on you in a further delicious kind of way.
Well, and I think this out of any of them would be a wine you would cellar and
Sure.
could cellar.
Could sell it.
And lay down for a few years and really kind of. I think it'd be fun and a blind tasting with some of the wines of the Côte d'Or, and
Sure.
really compare and contrast them, because this is a serious wine for sure.
This is what Burgundy is known for. You move a few paces either way, and it's a completely different wine, and that's why they divide it the way they do. It's impossible to memorize, but it's understandable when you drink it for sure.
There's been a lot of great work from a geological perspective that's been done in Burgundy over the last 15, 20 years. And, this is probably the most studied wine region on earth. When you map it up, you do see the little differences. It is an amazingly complex soil structure underneath the ground. And so when you're talking about, stepping one, from one vineyard to the other, and it's completely different, and it goes from Grand Cru to Premier Cru and all that stuff, there is always a reasoning behind it under the ground. Little pockets of clay or iron. There's some vineyards are richer in iron than others, and these things are all really important in the expression of a wine. And so, there is actual scientific backing. Terroir is really important, but a winemaker is equally important. And if you have great terroir, you can still mess it up, right? You still need a great winemaker to fully express the great vineyards that they're working with. So it's just something that you can study for the rest of your life and never fully master.
We're working on it
right now.
Well, you guys are mastered. You mastered it.
And now for our last red here, we are jumping villages, we're heading to Mercurey.
So yeah, Mercurey is probably the village that's most well known in the Côte Chalonnaise, I would say, mostly because it is the largest, right? So this is the largest village in the entire Côte Chalonnaise. It's the one most people see the most in stores and restaurants, and odds on this is what you'll see. And so it has a very renowned history. I think some people would argue it's too large, and that there's maybe one or two too many Premier Crus in the village. But it's a village that's always historically known for making the most powerful red wines of the Côte Chalonnaise. And a lot of times, power is equal to greatness, at least in the history of wine. And so, for much of its history, Mercurey was home to what is considered to be the best red wines of the Côte Chalonnaise. In reality, I think that's a little bit mixed now. I think they're equally great wines being made in Givry and Rouy. But if you look at it from a historical perspective, Mercurey is incredibly important for the history of the Côte Chalonnaise. So this is a Liud. We're south facing here, so you're definitely going to get a little bit more of a punch with the Mercureys. And this wine in particular, there's a little bit of iron in the soil, so you kind of always get this ferrous quality to the wine. And it's a really kind of usually a different feel from the Givrys of Sarrazin.
You almost get that like copper penny feel off the ferrous note on this one, especially on the back palate. It's very prominent.
And I get that kind of orange zest, orange oil thing coming out of it as well.
Oil, orange oil for sure.
It's more kind of bright, than the last two for sure, or the previous two for sure.
Right.
More in the red fruits.
Yeah.
It's very light, it's elegant,
big and rich.
It is nice to see a producer like Sarrazin that is able to find a little bit more of that elegant side of Mercurey. If you were to sum it up with Sarrazin, it's finding elegance in Givry, whether it be or Givry Mercurey, but sticking to the traditions of also creating wines that you can contemplate over. You can age them. They're delicious now. They'll be delicious in 10 years. And again, for the prices that they're charging, it's just a jewel and a gem of a domain, and we're really lucky to represent them.
This has been a real educational experience.
The best kind.
Yeah. A real masterclass tasting today on Burgundy in general, quite frankly, but also the wines of Michel Sarrazin. Huge thank you to our special guest, Ilya Smolenskiy, one of the senior French wine portfolio managers with one of our distributors, joining us today and just absolutely enlightening us on these incredible wines from the Côte Chalonnaise. And we're going to take them home and drink some more. So
I call dibs.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate the time.
Until next time. Cheers.